Zenless's lore is growing beautifully, and as a lore man myself, I want to take this opportunity to explain the short story behind all of the factions that currently contributes a great deal to the progression of ZZZ's narrative. Mostly the playable ones, but I'll also try to briefly touch upon the non-playable factions that I simply can't ignore due to their importance to the story. Just in case, spoiler alert for various portions of Zenless's main and character storylines. Might want to move away if you want to experience them yourselves. Right, let's get right into this. The name's Leafy, and welcome back to Let's Talk Slow About Games, Zenless Edition. Starting with the obvious first faction, which I actually almost forgot to put in the script because I kinda didn't consider them a faction in a literal sense, we have the Random Play folks, aka everyone associated with the main character's video store. While Bell and Wise aren't strictly playable in a combat manner, we do play as them more often now within specific story occurrences. Couple that with EOS's cute little Fall Guys sections that we have every now and then, and the teaser that Bell and Wise may have powers that are hidden from even us the players, there's definitely more that we can expect from our Random Play faction. But for now, the lore that we have surrounding these three is that Bell and Wise are siblings who have been running the video store as both actual movie aficionados while also using the store as a front for their pseudo dark web operations on the internet as the legendary proxy named Phaeton. Their status attained from the fact that they have the ability to fuse their minds with one of their bamboos named Eos, who then enter the hollow with their clients to guide them based on whatever commission it is that they accepted. It's through this part of their life that they are able to then find their way to forming connections with other factions that come from New Eridu's varying walks of lives. Big shot military personnels, high society conglomerates, royal rugrats of the desert, you name it. These two probably know of a way to get in touch with any of those people. However, with the teaser that I mentioned earlier, plus their confession to Miyabi at the end of Phaeton's story chapter 5, it's clear that the siblings are hiding more beneath their cheerful and carefree proxy video store owner demeanor. They were able to stand there and take a supposed, albeit weakened alien blast from a monster that just about gave some of New Eridu's elite fighters some decent trouble, all without even moving an inch. And while it seemed like they were orphans or at least did not know their parents, they have a connection to a potentially vital figure to New Eridu's lore, which is a scientist named Carol Arna, who happens to be their teacher at Helios Academy back in Old Eridu, the old capital that fell after it was consumed by a hollow. Carol is also known as the person who is accused to have caused said disaster, promptly earning the people she taught the nickname of Students of the Guilty. Bell and Wise uses their abilities with EOS and the HDD system, both of which are actually Carol's creation, to dive into the hollows and find more information about their teacher, since it is their belief that Carol had actually been framed by someone else, since according to their recollection, Carol was taken away by a giant white hand that was similar to what Inspector Bringer brought after he became corrupted. And of course, we can't forget that Random Play is also currently helped by Fairy, the sassy AI that seems to be considered one of the 4 keys in New Eridu. Keys to what exactly? We don't really know, but with how sophisticated and advanced Fairy's abilities are, we can only expect that her lore contributions will be made clear as the story progresses. Right, we've actually covered the most extensive one out of the factions we currently have in the game. We shall move on to the supporting cast of factions that surrounds our good old video store, and obviously, there's no better faction to start with other than the Cunning Hares. This ragtag group of Hollow Raiders, a term for people who enters Hollow without proper authorization, consists of 4 members, Nicole Demara and B. Demara, Billy Kid, Nekomata, and their resourceful bamboo Amelian. While they don't exactly have a direct position of influence in terms of New Eridu's day-to-day operations, they seem to possess the same wealth of connections that the Random Play siblings have. It's just that not all of those connections are made purely through a, decent business transaction, with some of them having a bit more history that varies from mysterious to just outright ridiculous background. Billy was once a Sons of Calydon member, more on that later, and B is technically the last remaining vestiges of an elite military squad, also more on that later. Nekomata was a former member of the Red Fang Gang, the game's secondary antagonist during the first chapter, while Nicole, as the leader herself, has found weirdo connections through her unorthodox ways of conducting business. She has a connection with an elite investigator named Hoshimi Miyabi by proxy of being the one to return her family's sword after Nicole herself had scammed the Fox Tyrant out of the possession of said sword. And it seems like she built an infamous reputation with the Phaeton sibling herself by always owing them money, but are still trusted by them when they need some important business to be handled. considering the fact that while all the members do have their quirks, they seem to actually be pretty competent at doing their jobs. The same rounds of quirkiness can also be said about our next faction, Belobog Heavy Industries. While yes, Calydon Belobog, the president of the construction company, looks and sounds like she hasn't even hit puberty, she is the knowledgeable and reliable leader of this faction, having taken over from her father, Corse Belobog, who was initially accused of having embezzled the company's funds and disappearing with it before Calydon Co figured out that he was actually silenced and murdered due to his knowledge of an ethereal monster which he managed to seal away at the cost of his life. Coming back to the quirkiness, the rest of the Belobog Industries members all have their own spin on it. Ben Bigger, the bear, despite his size and imposing figure, is the faction's head of finance. The scene where they meet the siblings is similar to the scene we saw in Zootopia when Judy and Nick met the Godfather character. Everyone thought the giant bear was the boss, only for it to be the small rodent. Anton Ivanov, the faction's project manager, is a musclehead who seemed to have somewhat of an intimate relationship with his jackhammer, while the same can somewhat be said about Grace Howard, Calydon's adoptive sister, and Belobog's lead tech. She has a funny obsession with her machines where she refers to them as children, and her lifelong dream was to create a child out of her machines, which she eventually achieved with the creation of Greta. They also have a bamboo named Safety who, with the presence of Grace, probably has to work overtime just to keep things in line with his name. During the story events after the deception that Vision Corporation enacted upon the people of New Eridu, Belobog Heavy Industries were the ones to take over the Metro project, solidifying their presence and return to their old glory as a respected construction business. Our next faction takes us out of New Eridu and onto the Outer Circle, where we look at the Sons of Calydon, a motorcycle group that has sizable control over the desert outskirts of the city and is currently home to the interim overlord Caesar King, who is also the current leader of the Sons of Calydon. Just like the traditional gangs you'll see from movies of the good old times, Sons of Calydon by default work alongside other gangs in the Outer Circle with respect to their territories, all while having, friendly rivalries against one another. Through the medium of a tournament called Tour de Inferno, these gangs periodically select a new overlord with candidates championed from all the gangs involved. Though the scope of the overworld's work hasn't really been specified, it is to say that the winner is then recognized as the controlling voice in how the running of the Outer Circle operations are supposed to be handled. Through Billy, we found out that Sons of Calydon were the faction that initially found the de facto boss of the Vision Corporation, Perlman, after he escaped arrest via a blimp. After some slight hiccups along the journey, the siblings then meet up with the faction to not only find information about Perlman, but to then also assist them in winning the Tour de Inferno in an effort to prevent a scheme made by their previous overlord's second-in-command who wanted to get a paycheck from Ether corporations who wanted to take over the outdoing operations. The Sons of Calydon currently have 6 playable members and a bamboo in hand. Their tough but actually soft-hearted leader Caesar King, the second-in-command who really actually wants to be in command but is actually just isn't mature enough for it, Lucy, their resident young-looking but actually a wise old lady Piper, the undefeated outer ring champion Lighter, Bernice, a mixologist who seemed to mix fuel with people's drinks, and their latest member, the cat tyrant who switched allegiances from one of their rival gangs, the Vanquishers, named Pulchra, with their bamboo to finish it off named Red Moscus. They actually have one more prominent member who isn't playable, known as Big Daddy. He was the former leader of the Sons of Calydon, who now seems to prefer to remain in the background and take care of more of the big picture stuff. Alright, we are moving back into the city. The next faction is pretty self-explanatory, seeing as they are the literal equivalent to New Eridu's police force, which is known as the Criminal Investigation Special Response Team. You call 911 in New Eridu, then this organization and its people are the ones who will be coming along to attend to your call. Well, maybe not all of them. There's a certain rat tyrant you probably wouldn't be too calm about having around, but we'll get to her in a bit. But to start, amongst the playable cast, we have Captain Zhu Yuan. Not only is she probably the one the siblings are the closest to, but as the one with the highest sense of justice amongst those in the squad, she is inevitably the busiest amongst them all. A stark contrast to her closest partner, that is Ching Yi, the android who would rather sleep and hustle old men in a game of chess rather than actually having the initiative to go out there and do work, but she's just as equally capable. And then we have ZZZ's spin-off on what if Tom and Jerry became a cat and mouse game between a cunning female rat tyrant and a clueless happy-go-lucky cat, which is where Seth and Jane steps in. While I did say that Zhu Yuan has the highest sense of justice, Seth himself is really not far behind. He's just a bit more, how should I say it, naive in how he chooses to act upon it. Jane Doe, on the other hand, does things her own way, and she is frequently sent into undercover missions with the express purpose of taking down criminal organizations from the inside. So yeah, when I say you probably wouldn't want her appearing out of nowhere, it's because she might be there to take you down instead. Let's stick to the theme of law enforcement and talk about the factions that are connected with Eridu's military, the new Eridu Defense Force. Within it, we have the Obsidian Division, which is actually the only division of the new Eridu Defense Force that survived the fall of the old capital, with the other two divisions that were completely wiped out being the Diamond Division and the Chrysoberyl Division. Within said Obsidian Division, there are technically two squads that feature our cast of playable characters, which are the Obol Squad and the Silver Squad. Let's start with the Silver Squad since they have a bit more of an extensive lore to talk about. Silver Squad was actually a squad that consists of only replica soldiers. Clones, essentially, with the squad's captain being Soldier Zero, or as we know her from before, as Anby, being the best of all the replicas. The Defense Force actually wanted to kill off the other replicas to save cost, but Anby kept purposefully failing her test to make it look like as if the entire Silver Squad is needed for her to be effective. However, the Defense Force then sent the replicas on a death mission anyways in order to eliminate all of them and just keep one replica. Though they had intended to keep Anby, another replica named Harin got injured during training, and Anby ended up taking her place during that fated deployment. Even though the mission was supposed to wipe all of them out, Anby managed to be the lone survivor, only to return and find that the Defense Force is ordering her to kill Harin because, again, they still only wanted to keep one replica. Unwilling to do so, she ended up slitting her own throat, forcing the Defense Force to keep Harin, and they threw Anby out by the ruins of the old capital where she was then found by Nicole and taken into the Cunning Hares. It was only until far later on when Anby discovered that Harin ended up becoming known as Soldier 11 and had joined the Obol Squad. Together they discovered that another member of the Silver Squad, Twiggy, was actually still alive though heavily dismembered. Twiggy had been trying to revive the Silver Squad using the Silver Replica technology and had been using its technology to... how should I say it? Harvest organs from imperfect clones for resources to perfect the cloning process. Which is dark. However, when an attempt to strengthen herself had gone wrong due to the interference of another clone who wanted to help her, they ended up turning into the ethereal Palicus. After a sizable skirmish, Anby and Soldier 11 managed to subdue the ethereal, killing both Twiggy and the other clone in the process. So officially, only Soldier 11 would be recognized as the remaining member of the Silver Squad, because with her new home in the Cunning Hares, Anby just straight up no longer sees herself as Soldier Zero, while Silver Squad's official presence as a squad will be marked as destroyed. From there, we can talk about Soldier 11's actual faction, which is the Obol Squad. In comparison to the Silver Squad, there's really not much to talk about the faction itself, other than the fact that Obol Squad operates under the Obsidian Division banner, and is somewhat of an elite task force even amongst the already elite level of the new Eridu Defense Force itself. So far, it boasts two playable members, which are the lead striker, Soldier 11, who as we know was part of Silver Squad, with the other member being a virtually blind sniper named Trigger, who was actually part of the Lyra squad, which was under the Chrysoberyl division that was wiped during the fall of old Eridu. At this point, the new Eridu Defense Force features quite a list of named deceased members, some who are involved within the in-game story of both Obol and Silver Squad, so you might want to play on to get more of a glimpse into who they are. And a small little fun fact, I guess, so far, this is the only sort of group of faction that doesn't really seem to have an exclusive bamboo canonically attached to them. Alright, and the final playable military faction we have is Hollow Special Operations Section 6. This is a faction that operates under HAND, Hollow Affairs and Neutralization Department, which works directly under New Eridu City Administration, which is basically the official government body of New Eridu. And to keep it simple, if I say that the Obsidian Division is an elite division of the Defense Force, then HAND in itself is a different level of elite amongst New Eridu's military, with Section 6 being its own level of elite between the sections of HAND. So, these folks are quite practically the cream of the crop when it comes to hollow neutralizations. Not really a surprise considering their founder and chief, Hoshimi Miyabi, is an individual categorized as a Void Hunter, which are a group of fighters on another bracket of power that we will discuss later on. But the point is, she is mega powerful, both in lore and in gameplay. But she's not the only one. Their deputy chief, Tsukishiro Yanagi, is a mix between a human and Oni, making her not that far behind when it comes to combat strength with Miyabi. Their other two members, Asaba Harumasa and Sokaku, also have their own potentials, with Harumasa having exceptional ether aptitude due to his ether aptitude regression syndrome, and with Sokaku herself being a straight-up Oni that Yanagi had saved. And their members are completed by a Bangbu named Agent Gulliver. Due to Miyabi's strength and the section's overall capabilities, Section 6 often found themselves in the spotlight, which not only garnered them the plentiful attention of civilians, but also the wary eyes of the people who seemed to view Section 6's prominence as an obstacle to how they like to run things in the background. With teasers of government corruption being a common occurrence in this game's story, coupled with Miyabi's purpose of founding Section 6 being to investigate and eradicate governmental corruptions, it's no surprise if Section 6 becomes a much larger figure when it comes to uncovering their government's true workings. And finally, we can move on from military factions and talk about the ones that comes from New Eridu's high society, starting with the Victoria Housekeeping Corporation. Essentially, they do what you think their company's name do: housekeeping. It's just that instead of only engaging in housework, this collection of maids is also employed to do a variety of other services, such as, to rid their clients' properties off of etheric disturbance, and by that, I mean that they are there to literally kill monsters. And if you're not careful and you trespass upon their client's land, then they might not hesitate to include you within the list of collateral injuries. Oh, and they are also in the business of acquiring any sort of items, dark web or not, they just do the job. Their leader is actually the mayor of New Eridu, but the one who is actually manning their field operations is a wolf tyrant named Von Lycan. And whether you like it or not, you gotta admit, the man's got style. Has a shady past that connects him to an upcoming faction that I'll talk about later on, and is a really cool big brother to the rest of the members, which consists of Rina, the head maid, with our resident shark girl Ellen and Klutzmaster Koran as their two reliable maids. Victoria Housekeeping is also the Random Play siblings' go-to faction to contact if they require any high society connections. Of course, there's the fact that the literal mayor is their leader, but they have also been shown to be well acquainted with the head of the Hoshimi family and Miyabi's father, Hoshimi Soichiro, who seemed to frequently request the housekeeping's service to the point where Soichiro would treat Lycan as a friend. Coming into the more obscure factions, we move on to the Stars of Lyra. While it's not exactly clear if the Stars of Lyra was supposed to only encompass the musicians involved in it, the general assumption is that this faction represents one of New Eridu's most famous musical group alongside their staff members. I say staff members because, while yes, its most prominent member is New Eridu's biggest star, Astra Yao, her bodyguard, Evelyn Chevalier, is also included within the Stars of Lyra affiliation, and so is their photographer Bangbu Snap, so I can only assume that even personnels are included within this faction. And seeing as they are the only 3 playable members, or rather confirmed members of Stars of Lyra, I think it's safe to think of it that way. This group has a rather unique position amongst the artists of New Eridu, as they seem to be under the direct management of TOPS, a consortium which includes all of New Eridu's biggest businesses. So they frequently appear in events that are either hosted or managed by TOPS, and Astra herself often felt as if she was trapped by the rigorous schedule that TOPS put her through, especially when it comes to events that were meant to quell people's concern about the rising dangers of ethereals and the devastation that hollows have brought upon their lives. It's fair to say that both Astra and Evelyn's involvements are usually strictly because of the hazards that the people who control them often drag them into, instead of ones that both Astra and Evelyn themselves find in, which is kinda unfortunate, especially for Astra herself, since her friendship with us has shown that she really is just a young woman who loves sharing her music with people. Yet, with how twisted the governance of their city is, it just seems to drag her into trouble every other day. And as for Evelyn, well, her story probably makes her more accustomed to the chaos, but still somewhat tragic-ish nonetheless, seeing as she was actually a hired arm that was supposed to either sabotage Astra's career or, worst, put an end to both the career and maybe Astra herself, but ended up literally becoming her bodyguard since she grew attached to Astra. Because, of course, why wouldn't you? I mean, look at her. Who wouldn't grow attached to that? Anywho, and the last, though not fully released playable faction we have as of the first half of Zenless version 1.7 is the Mockingbird group. Due to how limited the information we have on them kind of is, the most we can understand is that this is a group of vampires, or I guess in Zenless's world, bath tyrants who are notorious for being New Eridu's most prominent high-profile thieves. Most recently, they stole Astra Yao's self-made record, Stars of Lyra, which may not have been Astra's most valuable commercial record, but it's that intangible value of being one of Astra's own most personal records that made it so that it's worth stealing for this Mockingbird group, because that's kinda really what their shtick is. It's not really the price that makes it worth stealing, and more of, I guess, intangible value and intrinsic sort of meaning to the people associated with the item. So far, we know of 3 members from this group. One being Hugo Vlad, who seems to be the one who goes in and does the thieving himself while also being the prominent leader of the group. Second is Vivian Banshee, the one who is in charge of gathering intel for these heists and happens to be an enormous fan of Lord Phaethon, borderline being yandere at some point in time. And lastly, they have the most sophisticated Bangbu in Robin, a pretty cool direct counterpart to the butler that Victoria Housekeeping has. And speaking of Victoria Housekeeping, remember when I said Lycan had a shady past? Well, it was all connected to this Mockingbird faction, since Lycan and Hugo used to be partners whilst being the founders of Mockingbird. This connection with Hugo reveals a lot of nifty things about Lycan's character, a pretty cool playthrough for those of you getting to that point in the story. And that ends the short lore of the playable factions that we have as of Zenless version 1.7. For the following factions that I'm going to mention, these are a combination of groups that are pivotal to the story, as well as upcoming factions that will and would probably have playable characters coming within future versions. The biggest upcoming playable faction or collection of branching factions will be the Yunkui Summit. It is currently unknown what their actual roles will be, but they probably will have a big role during the 2.0 series of patches, with potential playable characters being its leader, Yi Juan, her student, Ju Fufu, and a panda who looks to be the perfect role for Jack Black named Pan Yin Hu, as well as, presumably, a lot of the characters we saw in their Season 2 PV. Now, onto the list of notable factions that doesn't really have any potential for having playable characters as of now, but will have major roles to play in the story itself. The first one being the Exaltist. This is an order that have been deduced to be behind all the ethereal related events during and before Phaethon's story. It's a religious cult that seems to believe that converting humanity into ethereals is the next step in humanity's evolution, and are constantly working to find ways in collaboration with an individual named the Creator to develop elixirs which are meant to refine humans into perfect ethereal forms that are then referred to as sacrifices. There are 6 known members of this order that we know of so far, with 3 of them being deceased members, which are Alolan Mystic, a Helios Academy researcher, the Exaltist Overseer, one of his former leaders that was taken down by the 3rd generation hit of the Hoshimi family named the Swordmaster, and Justin Bringer, the rogue inspector who was taken down by Miyabi at the end of chapter 5. The members who are known and are still alive are the Creator and the Prophet, which we know nothing about, with the 3rd member being Sarah. Sarah is particularly interesting as she is the woman who was actually controlling Pearlman and Vision Corporation in the first arc of Phaethon's story. But not only that, but she seems to also have an extensive connection with TOPS, that consortium of New Eridu's biggest business. If I were to simply describe TOPS, this is how I would put it in correlation to real life. We all know that as venerable as any government of a nation tries to portray itself, it's more than likely that at the end of the day, the big shot corporations will be the one calling the shots, as they are the ones who control the finances. TOPS is essentially that group of big shot corporations in New Eridu. Considering the fact that they were willing to sacrifice not only military personnel, but also civilians in order to guarantee the safety of one of their prized financial possessions, it really wouldn't be a surprise that they were willing to let Vision Corporation ignore the relocation of all those civilians on the metro line and decimate them, all to save some bucks for a project. And considering the fact that Sarah was also involved in the attempt to trap Miyabi, a Void Hunter investigator who wants to undermine governmental corruption and have her lose control around civilians, we can only assume that all the actions to control not only New Eridu, but also the fate of the civilians on the basis of money, will eventually all be tied back down to TOPS. I've actually talked about TOPS more extensively in an old video, so if you're interested, feel free to check that out. A short one that I want to mention is that we have the Marcel group. They are the ones who manufacture Bangboos. Just a solid piece of information to know about the ones making our cute little companions. And last but not least, we have the Void Hunters. Less a faction, but more like a group of significantly extraordinary individuals, both in terms of strength and intelligence, who have all contributed heavily to the protection of Eridu's citizens and the city's advancements. However, it's only when their achievements are recognized, I don't really know by who, will they be conferred said title. There are currently 8 individuals who are associated with the title of a Void Hunter. One is Swordmaster, the 3rd generation head of the Hoshimi family who took down the Exaltus Overseer. The second one, Sunbringer, the former CEO of Marcel Group who eradicated a Sky Hollow named Hive Lord while also being the inventor of Bangboos. Third, we have Joyous, the one who created the standard for hollow exploration routes. And then we have 3 individuals who are credited with pushing back the Dark Wall by 37 kilometers, an achievement belonging to Colonel Vike, Lieutenant Colonel Dan, and the unnamed leader of the Falkenhayn mercenary troop. The 7th being RK, the founder of Helios Academy and discoverer of common hollow characteristics. And last, as we all know, is Hoshimi Miyabi, Chief of Section 6, current holder of the Hoshimi's family katana, achieving her title by killing the giant ethereal Lerna on her own, subduing the Argos Hollow in the process. There are talks that potential upcoming character Yijuan is also a Void Hunter, but the livestream only mentions that she is a special investigator who has strength that is on par with a Void Hunter, so she probably doesn't have the title, but can definitely run a couple of rodeos with those who does have the title. And that's about it! I didn't think this video would get this long, but the moment I realized that there was plenty to talk about for plenty of factions, I realized that this was gonna be a bit of an exercise to narrate through, which is why I'm just gonna keep this outro short. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara.